My space.
Of course.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, good to go.
It was maybe slow, so maybe go up here a little while.
Oh. Okay. Oh, barely.
There's Matt, that's trouble right there.
Hey, Pam, I'm good. How are you today?
Doing good.
I forgot we had your honor in here today. Look at us.
Everything's trash everywhere.
Welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday, September 5th, 2023. My name is Mike Wicker, Mayor of the City of Cottonwood Heights, and this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. Is there
There's-
Yes. One of them on my microphone's here, but not even, sorry, I apologize.
hello?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So our first item of business for today is the review of our business meeting agenda tonight. We have kept it a little bit short on purpose as tonight is election night. So we will start with the pledge like always, go to citizen comments. And then we have 3 legislative action items to consider. The first item is 4.1, and there's a little bit of a disclaimer here, so I'll tell you about it. But it's consideration of ordinance 402, establishing temporary land use regulations for non-vegetative outdoor playing areas and commencing proceedings to amend ordinances. So we're going to talk about this in a staff report, so we're not going to go into detail, but we will not move forward with this action item unless we get a consensus or a majority of 3 to do so during the work session. If we don't, we'll scratch it, and if we do, we'll vote on it. And then the next thing for tonight is item 4.2, consideration of resolution 2023-46, approving a consulting agreement with Bowen, Collins and Associates Inc. for stormwater design services. So Matt, why don't you tell us about that?
Real quick, Mayor, this is when we have extraordinary amounts of rain, which we've had a couple of those in the last few years. We have a large volume of water that will come down Creek Road, most notably in the area of Peppers Hill, which is over, just to remind everybody, Peppers Hill is just west of Little Cottonwood Creek as you go up the hill. What this design process, what this is for, is to design inlets along Creek Road to pick up more of that water, to take it off of the road and put it into a pipe. We have a 30-inch pipe going down the road to pull water off of the road and get that into the pipe quicker, to avoid any damage down at the bottom or the mass flow of water coming to the bottom. So this contract is the design for that, to bring that back for approval on construction.
Great, thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt or discussion on this item? Perfect, thank you, Matt. Appreciate
Yes,
that. And then the last item for tonight is consideration of resolution 2023-47. Approving entry into an interlocal agreement with various jurisdictions for grants under HUD programs. That's you or Mike just wants to talk about this.
Happy to do it, or go ahead.
So, yeah, I don't have the full context ready, but this is an ILA that the council signed a few months ago to participate in the urban county program, which disperses CDBG funds from Salt Lake County onto cities. As that process went along, there were a few cities that chose to establish their own, be their own funding source or receive funds directly and administer the program their own way. So because of some technical changes to how I think Harriman is participating in a few other cities, the county required that an updated interlocal agreement be signed.
Okay,
That's all it is.
okay, perfect.
And we want to be part of the county program, have them administer it. We really aren't eligible for entitlement status to receive the funds directly because of our population size and that. So this is a good thing for us to still allow us to participate, but have it administered through Salt Lake County.
Perfect. Any questions? Comments? Okay. And then we'll approve our consent calendar tonight. I wanted to mention that Councilmember Holton is going to be online this evening for all three of our meetings. I do not see him there though. Is he there?
I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Matt. We're here. So
You all look wonderful.
thanks for lying. Okay. There we go. Okay. So we will move on. So why don't we switch up item 3 and 4 or
She's here.
oh, she was there. Okay. Pam's at the table.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's just do that. So let's switch up to item 3 and 4. So we'll begin today. So we have the general manager and CEO of Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling, Pam Roberts. Hi, Pam.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us, and we're excited to have you here. And so we'll be excited to listen to your report.
Okay, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. So I talked to Tim and he asked me to come before you and provide a report on the services that we provide for the residents of Cottonwood Heights. I think you are familiar with the district. We have 86,000 homes approximately, give or take, throughout the district. And many of those homes are right here in Cottonwood Heights. And I want to recognize our board member, Scott Bracken, who's here. Scott's been a long time board member, was one of our founding board members when we first separated from Salt Lake County and became the district, the Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling District. So does a great job representing the residents of the city, as well as looking at the district-wide services. The first page of my report, and I don't know.
Oh, do you want me to share it then?
Sure, if you wouldn't mind.
Sorry.
That's
I'll open it really quick.
great. I'll just kind of go over verbally. So one of the things we do is we recognize our employees that go above and beyond. In fact, we want to make sure we have safety incentives in place for them. Every year we celebrate what's called the National Waste and Recycling Workers Day. I've dubbed it the National Garbage Person Day. So we have a food truck that comes out to our offices on site, celebrate our employees, just so you know, if we go to the next one. The waste industry, the waste and recycling industry is among the top 6 most dangerous jobs in the United States. And a lot of people don't really realize that. You don't think about that. And sometimes when police and fire at the table, they raise their eyebrows and shake their heads and go, there's no way. But really, if you think about that garbage truck that's going around, that big arm that comes up and down is quite powerful. And then also when the trucks go into the landfill or to the transfer station, there's a lot of machinery moving around. And even though that truck is 10 feet wide, 14 feet long and weighs 17 tons empty, you would think that it would be easy to spot, but sometimes drivers just don't see them and they unfortunately crash into us. But at any rate, we celebrated on June 17th is the week of that, June 17th, the week of that June 17th is when the Workers' Day happens, and every year we celebrate our team. Okay, and then moving on, I wanted to recognize and talk about our employees, because these are our most valued resource. I think you know that as a city. Without our people, we can't provide the services for our residents and the communities. So we started what we call our informal apprentice program. So CDL drivers are shortage nationwide. I mean, we see it in the shopping markets where there's shortages of food on the shelves. We're seeing labor shortages of every industry. Going to the restaurant, it takes longer, et cetera, et cetera. So we started about 4 or 5 years ago to promote our container specialists. They drive those smaller trucks with they look like a cattle truck with cans in the back. You don't need a CDL to provide that service, but we had many that wanted to move up into our organization, and they found the only way, or the best way, would be to get a CDL and move up into the side load equipment operator positions. So James Kelsey was one of our first to do that as a container specialist. And just to show succession planning, James also moved into a lead equipment operator that was vacated by somebody who retired. And he is currently taking advantage of the tuition reimbursement program, has desires to move into management. And we do offer many incentives for people to go to school, go to certain courses to help develop their skills that we may need in business or managing our people. Oliver Balanzar was James' successor as a lead equipment operator. We have Ray Perry, who's one of our supervisors, and she's one of our first female supervisors. She started out as equipment operator, moved into a lead operator and supervisory role. Colby Sylvester down there on the left is currently working as a scrap driver. He started the container program, moved into Dallas Larrabee's spot, who's also an equipment operator. But at any rate, not to stay on this topic too long, but the ideas that we want to promote within our board just approved what we call an apprentice program. It's a formal training program for apprentices coming in, and we have 2 spots available for that. What an apprentice requires is somebody has to be 18, have a valid driver's license, and can pass the DOT physical. And so we're calling it internally, we call it our Grow Your Own Driver program. So we also have a training coordinator that will oversee that program, and then 2 trainers. So there's a lot of advancement opportunities with those positions as well internally.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Have you been able to, how long have you been doing that program, your internal?
I think it's been about 5 years. I want to say 4 or 5, right in there.
So have you seen the impact of retention there, the positive impact of retention?
Yes, sir. Thanks for asking that. Yeah, James has been with us for I would say about 8 years now. The first one that started in that program.
Mhm.
And I anticipate he'll stay and retire. At least I hope he does. He's a shining star, as well as Oliver. We want them all to stay and advance.
How many employees do you have?
Thanks for asking that. We have 99 full-time employees. 65 of those positions are equipment operators. And in fact, now we'll have 67 because we're adding the 2 trainer positions, but we're staying at 99 employees. We have 10 driver vacancies, or we just filled 3. But yeah, we're hurting for CDL drivers. And what we're finding is we're having to pull from other markets. So we have 2 long haul truck drivers that started with us. And so they're going to take extra training to get used to that, piece of equipment with the arm functioning. They're used to just going a long way versus start and stop between each home, picking up cans.
Whatever you do, don't steal the senior operators from UTA because we need them. No, but truly, I think, in our area, we are experiencing this trend is a real problem for our residents, especially the UTA. And only certain drivers can do the senior kind of driving. And I'm sure with the danger here, not everyone can step in and do that. So I'm glad to hear that you're focused on retention as well as attracting. That's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Moving on to the district updates, we had a new HR manager start with us. We had our former HR manager move on, and so we had Hazel Dunsmore, who worked for Draper City for many years in HR. And then when she got burned out through COVID, as we can all probably relate, and she moved into being the manager over the solid waste division, waste and recycling collections. So she understands us. She did that for about 1.5 years. So she brings that experience with her and understanding. And then, as I mentioned, we're going through some staffing issues right now. But we're confident that we'll be able to fill those vacant positions through the apprentice program and also through recruitment efforts coming in. With the shortages that we have in staffing, we have postponed the trailer rental program. That's the one where residents can call and rent a trailer. It's different than scrap, which I know we recently went through Cottonwood Heights, and I'll give more information on that program. But the trailer rental, we've postponed until the end of September, until we can get more CDL drivers up and running. I mentioned the scrap program. We've got 4 vacancies in that particular program. We were hoping to get at least 10 seasonal drivers. We've been able to get 6. And then we've used, like Colby Sylvester's been going over there, and that's where he's getting his CDL training and experience that way, coming up through that way, part of our organization. Then we have the ground crews that also help with tarping the container, so the drivers can just pick it up out of the driveway and move on. No questions there. We'll just move on. Customer satisfaction, we're revamping our landfill vouchers. They'll still be available, but we're looking at taking those electronic so residents can download a QR code off of our website. We'll still have the paper ones available here at City Hall, but the idea is to move to a paperless system. And then this way, it also helps us track a little better and maybe tighten up a little bit where somebody might be using 10 vouchers for their home project or something of that nature, that maybe we just limit that person to 2 a year. But we still want to have that opportunity for residents to haul their own truck or trailer load to the landfill. We also have a chat bot. This came about on our website. It's a way to have a 24-hour service for our residents to go on and answer any questions. You can see the commonly asked questions over here on the right. And if ever you go on there and there's a question that you want to ask that isn't there, you can let us know and we'll add it to the list. But this also saves our customer service time, our customer service representatives time to answer emails or deal with billing or anything else that might pop up. The thing that we're working on as well to help to reduce cost is a route accuracy. So this is where we might miss a can or unfortunately sometimes miss a street with newer drivers coming in and maybe not familiar with routing and maps. So we're trying to reduce that. And we have iPads for our supervisors and lead equipment operators to use so they can identify where the trucks are and who can get to that missed street or missed can quickest and with the least amount of miles. We do use GPS and then forward-facing dash cams as well. So if ever, and we've been able to dispute false claims, like if somebody says you rear-ended my car or you hit my car as your driver was going down the road, we've been able to fight those claims with those videos footage and save thousands of dollars, which is very nice.
If in that particular case, the truck was driving down the road and the damage was already there.
Yep.
I was like, well, we didn't do that. We don't know who did. But because it was on the video, I think Chief Russo would concur that having cameras on the employees and stuff like that really save you a lot of grief. And
Man.
Amen, huh?
They're always honest. What are you talking about?
All right, the next one, I go through all the stuff that we pick up here for Cottonwood Heights and then district wide. These are some stats from 2022, January through July, and then 23 this year, January through July. And you can see here in Cottonwood Heights, the garbage tonnages Cottonwood Heights stats are in the gold, as you can see, and then they're district-wide are in green. And then you got the landfill voucher information down below. And you can see that in 2023, the landfill vouchers have been better utilized, let's say. And then the district pays for the cost of going to the landfill for that service. Recycling tonnages, this is something we've been keeping an eye on. We have seen a decline over the past 3 to 4 years. Some of that I think was related to COVID, and what I mean by that is we weren't able to get out and educate our residents on what's okay to put into that blue can. And in going around to the communities and with McKenna Tuape, been going out, she's our sustainability coordinator. We see there's still a lot of confusion from residents. So I think there's still recycling going into the black can, going out to the landfill that could be recycled. So we want to beef up those educational.
But how much are the green waste cans being what I want,
Used?
having them unable to be recycled because of the wrong things being put into the green cans.
Our contamination rate is actually pretty low.
Right, the most recent sorts we did was less than 20%. So if you look at it, there's roughly over 80% that's actually going to be recycled and not going to the landfill. Because
You're saying 80% of the recycled are not contaminated.
Correct,
So
yeah,
they actually get recycled. You have 20% that if someone throws in a can of oil or a lot of food or something that gets on a bunch of stuff, that can't be recycled.
correct.
And so
Well, I've never, I was hoping if it hadn't been so windy at our block party that occurred this last week,
Yeah,
I had my car loaded up with all kind of question mark things because, I find that I go on the website and there's a lot of great information and pictures. But let me give you an example. It'll say, be sure to take the lid off if you're gonna recycle, given, let's say, milk cartons. But then I'll buy a milk carton, say at Whole Foods, and on the milk carton, it'll say recycle, screw on lid, then recycle. I mean, it feels to me like, and I don't know what contaminates. Like if I leave a lid on, does that contaminate the whole?
no,
Like, what does it take to contaminate? How
how does
you
it
just-
work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure you could counsel us all day on this, but
Right,
there's so many questions that I know a number of my constituents also have these kind of burning.
yeah, well, and we do have a app, the Wooford app. So if you go into your app store, whichever type of phone you have, and you just type in Wooford or Wasatch Front Waste, then our app will pop up. And it'll give you, once you type in your address, it'll give you reminders about when your collection day is. It'll also, there's a recycle right tool in there. So you can look up any item, you can type in any item and it'll tell you if it goes in the black can for garbage or in the blue can.
So this is beyond what appears on the website. This is you can put in the actual brand or product and it'll tell you.
Yeah,
Oh,
and you can also download the app through a QR code on our recycling page. You just scroll down, it says recycle right, and you just download that QR code.
like I say, a lot of it is if it's something that spreads to other things, that's why they don't want food in the pizza box top can be grease or have stuff that will get out on the other paper and other things and contaminate them.
Yeah.
Can of oil is horrible. The can is wonderful. The oil in
Empty.
it getting all over the place is awful. So
so food scraps like dairy, a little yogurt on or this or that, that's of no consequence. It's
As long as it's
major greasy.
empty,
yeah, you just want to.
empty. Like
If you have
even
to
a
rinse
water
it out,
bottle.
can it have food particles on it
If,
that
It-
aren't major grease?
yeah, as long as it's empty. If there's like a little bit of yogurt in the bottom, we just ask that you shake it out. You don't necessarily have to rinse it. You don't have to wipe it out. We basically say don't waste one resource through another. But you can empty it out and then put it in.
Mm.
Water bottles, a lot of times people think that a water bottle even full is okay. It's not. The water can damage papers. cardboard, etc. So that needs to be empty as well.
Yeah, they get soda bottles with, you know, a couple ounces in the bottom. When they finally get broken open or whatever, then that spills out and gets all over stuff.
The recycle can't be in a bag, is that right?
Yeah, we prefer it to be, if it needs to be bagged, there's paper bags that they can go in. But the recycling center may or may not break open that bag because of time. So time is money. They're private companies. And so if it's loose and in the can, then it's better. Understanding that on windy days that can create some havoc, but our drivers work hard to make sure they capture the recycling, even if it's blowing around. I'll try to.
Well, and I don't know if you can speak to this, but you know, Smith's and all, probably most of the grocery stores have a place to put your plastic bags that they've issued. But I also, there's so much that is so over packaged. So I have all the flimsy plastic and I always stuff it in and then take it to the grocery store. To your knowledge, am I contaminating there a loose plastic? If I have all, as long as I can crumple it up, I can take it to the grocery bag recycle. Is that the case?
Mhm. Yeah, so anything that's flimsy that you can cramp.
I mean, it's amazing. In our household, there's only 2 of us.
Mhm.
And I can tell you in 4 to 6 weeks, I will have a bag this big full, and I never take plastic bags wherever I shop. No, don't get, thanks for asking. I don't want one. I try so hard, and yet the amount of plastics that we are throwing away is just breathtaking. And the outcome of that. Anyways, this is such an important subject, and I'm so glad you're here tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you'll be happy to hear, we had the discussion with the board on recycling because the processing fees, of course, everything's gone up, right? So the cost to process the recycling has gone up as well because it takes more power, it takes, et cetera, driving and transporting the recycling to the commodity markets. So we're paying more per ton to have things recycled than if they went into the landfill. And that's not uncommon. That happened about 3 or 4 years ago. And we surveyed the residents to say that it's costing more. Do you want to still keep it going and pay for recycling to go for recycling versus going into the landfill? And it was very district-wide. There was over 68 or 79% that said, yes, we want to keep it going. And yes, we'd be willing to pay to keep it going for the next fee increase. As you all know, we just raised fees coming into this year up to $19.50 per month at $58.50 a quarter, and then $234 a year. Which, if you think about it, putting your can out every week, both cans, it's quite the bargain. But I know for some folks that can be maybe not viewed that way. But our board did discuss recycling, and yes, we could cut costs by going to biweekly, but at what price? And what I mean by that is customer service, public confusion, when's my can gonna be out? And then also the price of, we would not be able to divert more waste away from the landfill.
We're paying more for recycling now, but if we fill up the landfill,
Long-term cost.
everything goes.
Which the
Yeah.
Transjordan landfill is just about full, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, so is there any discussion amongst the various district waste management companies, say within the Wasatch Front, to come up with a uniform color system for the receptacles? I saw an analysis recently, and many of us have family. I babysit my grandchildren and this and that. And there's not a uniformity to what color the receptacles are, for refuse versus green, so organic waste versus recycled versus garbage. Is there any effort to make a uniformity within the Wasatch Front, not just Whitworth, but do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the can that you put out to the curb.
Yeah, like,
Mhm.
and I didn't bring the data with me, but in Sandy, it's different than Cottonwood Heights,
Right.
which is different than Midvale, which is different than Murray. And I think that must contaminate. Like, I'm so surprised that we have only a 20% contamination rate because I mean, as a.
Cottonwood Heights contamination rate is actually lower than most, a lot of the other cities in the district. We
Yeah,
usually do-
16 to 18.
We do, we
Yeah, you
usually
did a great
do
job.
So my,
well.
question is more to help with the reduction in stuff taken to the landfill by having a uniformity. Do you see
Color
that
can.
coming? Is there any, do you talk with these other agencies or?
Well. Yes and no. So I think the color of the can is really dependent on the municipality or the vendor that's providing that service. The cans really have been in place for decades. For us, it's always been a blue for recycling and black for garbage. And then the green can for yard waste just rolled out in 2014, right? And that's subscription. And then the curbside glass, which is also available for Cottonwood Heights residents, is gray. So we tried to match closely to one of the bigger cities, which is Salt Lake City. And so our cans are pretty close, other than they have a green garbage can, but our recycling can is blue, just like theirs. The majority in the valley are blue. I think it's Murray and Sandy that have green, but I believe the majority of the recycling cans are blue. So we tried to go with what was out there, so to speak. Of course, I wasn't around in 2003 when it was rolled out originally as subscription, but in 07 when it went district-wide, bi-weekly.
Well, it's been a few years, but when we looked at cans and replacement costs on them, there's Brookford has currently it's probably 10 million, $11 million worth of assets in cans.
Out on the street, yeah,
that go
Yeah, I mean,
every
I
day.
just-
It's not a small amount of.
no. and
I'm always
spend
interested
over
in
$500,000 a
phasing
year.
projects that can phase over time to a better, superior systems that will serve the larger community and.
The continuity is helpful, there's no question. Getting into the ever popular seasonal container reservation program, I think everyone's familiar. We made the change from the containers in the street where we were able to deliver, I should say, drop off and pick up to 120 containers per day. And that was because we were rich in CDL drivers and seasonal staff of over 20 drivers being hired on an annual basis to come in and run that program the way it was. And then in 18, we saw a big change in a decline in CDL drivers. 19 was when the bottom fell out, so to speak. We were 10 drivers short on the full-time side, and we were 10 drivers short on the scrap side, or what used to be the area cleanup side. And then, everyone relates the change with COVID. I would say the tipping point was staffing first. COVID coming in was secondary, and I begged, Scott might remember this, but I begged the board to allow me to make a change in 2020, knowing that we would not be able to recruit and retain enough employees to run it the way it was. And so anyway, we started that container program back in 2020. I think it's very popular still. It's very desired. District wide, we averaged about 9% of the homes that we service for each city. Cottonwood Heights, we were able to service a few more than that with 10%. So we delivered just over 1,000 containers during the 15 days here in Cottonwood Heights. As I mentioned, it's 10% of almost the 10,000 homes we service here. We collected 750 tons of waste, which is almost just a little less than a ton per container. And I think you understand if you drove around to see what's in those containers, there's mattresses, which are not very heavy. Fridges can be heavy, tires, etc., furniture. A lot of times we get green waste in there. The question has been asked, do we take that for the composting? We do not. We dump it as garbage simply because we can't sort through it. And there's probably mixed items in there as well. But we do, when we have staffing available, which we anticipate will be October, we do have the trailer rental. And there is a green waste trailer that's available for $55 for people to rent if they have specifically green waste. And may I also add, for any situations like code enforcement or the wind damage, if there's any wind damage in the city needs trailers or anything, I know you have Matt and his team of Public Works, but if ever you needed our services, we'd be happy to help. Even with staffing shortages, we would make sure we are able to help you.
You ever, before we move on from that, have you ever done a cost comparison? A number of my constituents were interested. Well, just to give you feedback, you may have heard this, I'm sure Scott has reported this in his regular meetings with you, but we have residents who have indicated that when the trailer is delivered to their home, that they are sometimes seeing that unwanted, like stuff that isn't theirs, whether it's a commercial pickup truck pulling up and dumping stuff into their container. And before anything can be done, that truck is driven away. And so they've been asking me, what about the way they do it in Sandy, where that your neighborhood, if you put stuff out curbside, will get picked up on a certain week during the summer. And I'm just wondering what the cost comparison is per household of a program like that versus requesting the trailer and having it, the system that we are currently on. Is it?
I could say that our program, even delivering them into the driveways, roughly it's a 1.2 million a year, roughly. And we're still going through some of the program cost accounting. And for Sandy's.
That's just for Cottonwood Heights, it would be 1.2 million.
No, overall annual for us to provide the service
So-
district wide. So for Cottonwood Heights, I'd have to
Yeah.
get you breakdown.
Yeah, no, I'm more interested in the cost per household, doing it with a curbside pickup versus the trailer.
Sandy's
rental.
program is significantly different. So I talked to Cindy about it after our meeting. It's probably better to handle that discussion. It's fairly involved.
Yeah. Yeah, but I understand, and we get compared to, and I'll get phone calls, and why can't you do it this way or that way? And Salt Lake City does it out in the street. And my understanding is anything out in the street has to be picked up within 12 or 24 hours for storm drain protection. And the container programs, of course, it's contained. When we had the containers on the street, we had the mini landfills. So the tendency is you see something in the street, you're going to put it out there. And even now I see folks throughout the district or the valley really putting things out to the street, thinking somebody else will take care of it. Which
Well, what I mean, only because my son lives in Sandy, I will say that one of the things that's appealing to me about putting things out curbside is that people in need will often drive through those neighborhoods knowing, and they will take many of the pieces of furniture and lightly used things. So it has a byproduct, you could say, of reusing things instead of everything going to the landfill,
sure.
which so between that and the level of convenience to do it that way as opposed to ordering a trailer just for your own residence, it would be of interest to me to know if that could be a consideration.
One of the nice things about the trailers is they do, and I think they still do have the label on there saying, please share with your neighbors and allow your neighbors to utilize that. And I do that with my neighbors when we order it. I tell everybody what date it's coming and they just dump all their stuff in there as well.
Thank you for doing that.
Hey,
Yeah,
Mayor, if we've got time, I've got a separate question, if that's all right.
Go ahead, Matt.
First off, thanks for focusing on customer service. I have engaged with you all a ton and it's been a great experience. Your chat bot was super helpful when I wanted to replace my can. And it's not normal for government entities such as yours to focus on customer service, and it's always been positive. So thanks for making that a priority. A question that I have is for the older demographic in our community. I do know that we've got a bunch of cul-de-sac, which is kind of unique for municipalities. We've got a lot here in Cottonwood Heights, and some of the elderly neighbors that I have, I see that they've got to take those cans out to the middle of the cul-de-sac, which obviously for ease of transport purposes of your trucks, it makes sense. It is tough. I try to go help some that I can during the winter when they're trying to get a can all the way from the back of their house to the middle of a cul-de-sac. And frankly, sometimes they just miss certain weeks because they physically can't do it. Have you thought of any other best practices or other ways to try to capture those, especially those people that physically cannot carry their trash can to the middle of a cul-de-sac? especially when there's snow. I'm sure this is something you've thought about. It's hard to see it happen, and you try to help them, but you can't capture all of them. So I'd love any thoughts that you have to try to lend a hand to those folks in a better way.
You bet. Appreciate the question. So we have what's called the Assist program. And it's specifically for people that have mobility issues. And they can call our office, let us know what their issue is. Sometimes we just need some sort of a documentation to say that, yes, they're physically limited and can't take their can out. So our drivers will go up to where their can is at their home and take it out so that it can be dumped. And they'll bring out, the first driver will bring out with, both cans, basically empty the one commodity that they're there to pick up and leave the cans out. The second driver will come up and empty their commodity and take both cans back to the house. So we do have it marked on the route maps for the drivers so that they can see clearly when they need to make sure they provide that service. And it's not uncommon. I would say that, I'd like to say that we're the only hauler that does that, but it is a common industry practice to do that.
So you will do that not only in cul-de-sacs, but say steep driveways
Yes.
where the elderly people can't?
Yes.
We bought our house from a couple who moved away because they couldn't handle the waste containers on our steep driveway. So I didn't know that. That's a wonderful program. That's amazing.
Could you walk me through that process real quickly? So would they just call your main number and state that they've got some inabilities, and what kind of documentation would you be looking for? I just want to make sure I can pass off the right info.
So yeah, have them call our main line, or they can call me directly. I'm happy to walk through it with them as well. And that's the first starting place. And then we would just kind of go through, have them answer a few questions for us. And find out for sure where they're at, where they put their cans, and just walk through the logistics with them.
So you don't have to have a doctor's order or something like that saying that you're disabled.
No, not this disabled, but if you have a mobility issue that's going to limit you from being able to physically move that 50-pound can, and when it's full, maybe 75 pounds, then yes, we would make sure we take care of them.
Is that something that you could also do seasonally? I know that some can do it when it's nice and dry and others can't when there's a ton of snow. Is that something that can be broken out that way or no?
I would say yes. We would just make sure that we get it on
Okay.
the route maps. Yeah.
Amazing. Again, thanks for the customer service focus. That's pretty spectacular. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Give more slides, Pam, or?
Just walking through the diversion rate is we talked about with recycling. So there's other ways that we try to divert waste away from the landfills. I mentioned the subscription green. Sorry, I'm trying to go so fast because I know you're limited on time. Over 1,500 subscribers here in Cottonwood Heights. And we do collect a revenue for that to help pay for that service. So we don't want that particular service to be supported by our monthly fee, right? It's a separate one. And then the glass subscription. And then we also have 7 central sites. And I will say that I know the city's been involved. We had the container over at Public Works and we needed to move that. So it's at a temporary location over at Reams. I know everyone's anxious to get that over to the Whitmore Library. We are as well. So recently I received basically the terms from the library of what they need from us. And I'm developing an MOU to get that moved as quickly as we possibly can. But the bottom line is we'll be responsible to service it, keep it clean. I think that's just what the library wanted in writing to make sure that we would do that. And then Cottonwood Heights, again, you're doing very well, 20% diversion rate. That's really good. Our goal as a district is 18. So thank you very much for keeping it up there and setting the bar. I need to work on our residents in Mill Creek a little better, I think. So, we did meet the goal though, 18. I want to, tout out.
Have a much wider demographic in Mill Creek as
Yeah.
well.
Very, recycling updates. We have a new recycling flyer, and I apologize. I meant to bring some with me and I flew out of the office too quickly. But you can also go online and take a look at this on our recycling page. Our board helped to develop this new flyer, so I want to thank the board for that. We also launched a sticker campaign. Cottonwood Heights was not part of that sticker, and you'll be happy to know that we were targeting folks that needed a little more education on what can go into that blue can and what cannot. So the campaign included 3 cities to the west side. And the folks literally went out and cleaned off the lid of the recycling can and put the sticker on it so that those pictures are right there so they can see it. What's okay to put in there and what's not. And what we found is really face-to-face education or personal contact somehow is really what increases the recycling rates and increases the cleanliness of that. So no questions there, and just keep going.
All right.
We're very focused on risk management. We do understand that we can reduce costs by keeping our claims low. We're fully insured with the Utah Local Governments Trust. And as you can see, the graph over there and how we are trending in the right direction. We have fewer claims this year. We have safer days. We call them safe days. And we do provide incentives, safety incentives for our employees when they have, individual safe days is the bar graph on the right. And then the team awards, the team appreciation recognition program. We have a $25 Amazon card and they work as teams. And if each team is safe, each of those team members gets a $25 Amazon gift card for a month of being incident free, no claims filed. Okay.
Oh, you're going the wrong direction.
And then that's it. I was going thanks for your patience. So I was making sure my mouth was moving as quick as my.
Well, Pam, thank you. We look forward to this every year. I kind of describe you all as an offensive line. You don't get a lot of credit. People are there to watch the quarterback, but if you don't do your job and there's garbage on our streets, people will notice. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is we're going to go to Utah State Representative Galen Benyon. Is asked to give the council an update on what she's been working on with the legislature with regards to short-term rental. So if it can come up.
Hi, glad to be with you. Thank you so much. I've heard from emails and I've had constituents want to meet with me in person and talk about this item. I don't know if you want to have this be a discussion or have me report. How would you like?
It's whatever you think will flow better. So I'll leave it up to you.
All right, so this has been one of my top priorities in the legislature is housing in general. And we had the KMC Gardner report that showed an increase of short-term rentals throughout the state, and particularly in areas like ours that are attractive and have so much recreation nearby. And we also, it's just obvious that it's another impact on the availability and on the supply of housing when it takes long-term rentals or homes out of the market. So for those reasons, it's been something that I've tried to focus on. One of the members of the Planning Commission here suggested a bill back in 2022 that I ran. And that bill would say it would have given cities the ability to have a mandatory minimum. And that bill did not get heard in the committee because it was kind of late in the session that we got it through. And then there was also a short-term rental working group last interim session led by Representative Musselman that I was able to serve on. He and I both had a bill during the session and neither one passed. And I'm glad to talk about the details of the bills and answer any questions you have. There is not an interim short-term rental working group this session. And I continue to talk with Representative Musselman and others about what we could do at the state level. But for the past 18 months, because of that bill I ran in 2022, I've been in connection and in emails and meeting with a national expert who I've really grown to trust, and her name is Julie Davies. She is a Utah native who now teaches in our colleges and lives in Nevada. She's worked in the hotel industry as well as had her own short-term rentals. And I really appreciate and trust her values and her experience. I think we both share the goal of having the best ordinances possible for municipalities and to remove any barriers that the state is placing that impede the best function. Because Short-term rentals are not going away, but we want to limit them in a way that won't negatively impact our neighborhoods. That's my goal. And the goal of our constituents too. I could talk about, I sent to the committee, I told, she has worked with Brighton on their ordinance. She is willing to just donate her time because of the impact that she sees happening in Utah. Because we're such a desirable place and that we are being kind of abused because of our state ordinance too and the limitations placed there. So I could talk about some general ideas, or first, maybe I'll do that. Okay, so she gave 11 pages of feedback on our ordinances, and I hope that the staff will look through those in detail, because there are words like eviction that don't apply to short-term rentals. That's just a guest and a host, and you can remove a guest. She gives so much good feedback on specific language, but there are 5 kind of broad areas to discuss that could be improved in Cottonwood Heights code, which is good code, but could just make it better. And one of those is to make it very clear that it is the owner of that short-term rental that is responsible for anything happening, that they are a business owner and that they should be responsible, that they should be the one to have the license and the permit, that they could lose those if they don't keep code complied with, that they are the ones, and that even in a LLC or a trust, it should be an individual in that LLC or trust that is responsible for that property with the city, and that if they go and get a local contact or manager for that property, that person also you could have as a city, have it be that they have to come and get a license with the city, and that if they don't fulfill their part of the responsibilities, that they could lose or have a fine on them. As much as possible, these kinds of ordinances will keep the burden off of our law enforcement. If we're holding the owner and the local contact responsible, it should not be something our police have to do. They are responsible for safety and crime prevention and dealing with crime, and they should not have to have this on their plates as well, as much as we can. So all of this in detail is in what I sent you, and I really think this is super important. And the second thing that both Representative Musselman and Julie Davies agree on is that it's wise for a lot of cities like Cottonwood Heights have some zones that are just no short-term rental allowed. But as we know, and as any enforcement can tell us, they're happening there anyway. So what they would both recommend is that cities look at where on the websites and on the calendar, where is demand being filled in your city? And then maybe you need to grandfather in or change zonings to allow for some of that to happen and get them into having contact with the city and having walkthroughs of their homes. Because I've been told by constituents, clear violations, that if they were working with the city could enforce better. So they would both say, look at various platforms, maps, and see where hosting is currently happening, and maybe grandfather some of those in and get them in.
Who does that?
Julie Davies could point you to
I
sites.
know they do in Sandy. They have
Well,
neighborhoods and then.
Okay, well, actually, last fight on this from the legislatures, we're not allowed to look at those maps.
You
for
are,
enforcement.
so from what I understand, and I am willing to talk about this, that you can look at those, you just can't have that be the only thing if you're taking it for a court case.
If I may add, one of the things, and I recognize in that there was discussions related to this, what I have struggled with some of the discussions is when properties when they're not allowed to have a short-term rental and they come in and do it illegally, to me, there's no grandfathering in. They're not in compliance. A grandfathering is when something is established legally and then the ordinances change. And so
Right.
that's what grandfathering is. If you come in illegally, there is no grandfathering with that. And I know there's a lot of discussion with the league and others, but that's what I've struggled a lot with that concept, because they're coming in. We allow them, don't get me wrong, we allow them in our city in certain places. We don't have a lot of issues once we license those that are allowed in certain zones. The problems that we have is when they come in and establish in an area that's not legally allowed. To allow that to be quote grandfather doesn't work to me from a legal perspective.
Right.
Tim, I would agree. This is Matt. I would agree. I do think that the onus should be on the platforms. I do think that if these individuals are not licensed and zoned, then they should probably be removed from the platforms. Grandfathering, there's no precedence of them ever being legal, so I would agree with that, Tim. I also think that we need to change the way that they remit taxes for TRT. I think that there should be more transparency on behalf of the platforms, and I think any legislation that moves forward should have some of those components to make sure that they're treated on the same level playing field as others in the industry, to make sure that when it comes to enforcement, if you don't know specifically how many dollars are coming from which location, that's tough. That's tough to actually track down and enforce.
Thank you, Matt. And I would agree with that. This expert, Julie Davies, would say, and I believe it's in the bill that I had last session, which I brought copies of if anybody wants it, that the owners should be remitting taxes outside of the platforms, because some of them do that. They have rentals outside of the platform, so they should have their own tax number and be transparent on all the business that they have. So again, coming back to this issue of whether it's grandfathering or whether it's changing your zones, you need to, as a city, look at how you can get these illegally operating to at least come forward in some way, because without that, they'll just keep operating and they won't have the benefits that they could have. I would say, from working with Julie Davies, if we can get them to, if we can fill the demand with properly operating short-term rentals, that will push out the illegally.
And do you see those stipulated as only owner occupied?
No.
No.
Another big thing that I think would really help Cottonwood Heights Code. I really appreciate this meeting, and I took time to read through Cottonwood Heights Code and appreciate her looking at, with her years of experience in teaching in our universities. One thing that would really help our code is to specify that only one reservation group in the unit per day be added to the code. I have someone in Cottonwood Heights whose neighbor added 3 kitchens to their residential neighbor's home in a zone where none of this is allowed. So if you had in the state code, in your city code, that there could only be one reservation group per unit per day, and they were trying to rent out to 3 different groups in that home, it would be a clear violation. And so I think that's a really good thing to add. In the state code, it talks about apartments. Is the city allowing short-term rentals in apartments and condos? If we're concerned about housing affordability, apartments should not be a place for short-term rentals, because that's basically a hotel. Go get a hotel room. There are hotels that have kitchens and kitchenettes or whatever you need. I think, and Julie Davies would agree, that apartments should not be short-term rentals. And then the final one is education. It's been found that short-term rental education for owners and managers is extremely helpful for them and for code compliance and enforcement. If people are trained on what their responsibilities are, they do better. These courses are approved throughout Utah higher education. There are currently several available. They're short, and a growing number of cities are requiring city-approved STR education for their applicants and designated local contacts, because it helps with code compliance. So those are the only things. And then there's more specifics in the 11 pages that I sent. And I am very aware of the problems the state legislative, what we have now poses. I talk with Representative Musselman and others about changing, and they say that there's not a need that people are able to enforce. So I'm here to hear your feedback. I'll be talking with another mayor from Helper later this week. From the League of Cities and Towns, they told me that they're not hearing a lot this year. I would love your feedback.
Go ahead, Scott.
A city may have a hard time enforcing this, but I mean, part of it is just certainly the feeling that based on a listing somewhere that you can't. I'm wondering, and maybe this is something to discuss there, if the state required a badge or a certification or some notation on listing that says that they have a tax ID number or a business license or some sort of a doppel, maybe doppel handles it. I don't know. It's not a professional license, but that was required on the listings for ones in there that could possibly help. At least identify to other users that, you know, this is one that's operating within the constraints of the state and the local. I don't know. That was just something that popped in my head.
That's something that we've discussed, and I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I would fully support that.
I know capacity for municipalities is an issue. And I had this idea as one of my neighbors that a number of us have spoken to came up with this concern. Has the state ever talked about putting together a registration process where each time a residence is rented, they have to register, or the manager has to register that folks are going to move there? That would eliminate one of your 5, the limited reservations issue. If they had to say, okay, on this date, we have this party coming in to rent this property, and do that each and every time, it will allow at least for that visibility as to some of the activity that's going on there.
So have a state website where
Where
people
go in and
list.
register and list exactly who's, when, the date, who's coming in. And that way we can also hopefully have access to that to be able to track those activities. And not have to have go through a, big deal to get the information, just be able to go and as a municipality, pull that information off of that site and then be able to gather data that way.
Good.
My comment, Galen, would probably be, to put more restrictions when we can't enforce what we have already is the problem to me. So, and I know that's throwing it back in your lap, but to be honest with you, I think it is a state issue. We can do whatever we want with our code, but if we can't enforce what's happening already, the state initiates and collects the tax. The state, somebody needs to take leadership and get something passed at the state level to help us. Because to me, it's not worth spending a whole lot of time if we can't enforce what we already have on the books. To make anything more restrictive or better ideas sounds nice in theory, but until the state does their job, I don't have a whole lot of interest in moving forward with anything. Anyway, so that's my thoughts.
That's why I think something like a database where it's information collected, we could come up with some semblance of a way to manage that. And that visibility.
And right now, the state doesn't allow us to do that.
So what I get back from people like Representative Musselman is that the bill, the language that we have at the state says you cannot use that as the sole, that listing or advertisement as the sole piece of information, but you could have other information if you were going to take somebody to court. Do you feel like, so if you added to the city code, you can only have one rental per unit, do you feel like you couldn't enforce that?
How do we enforce that? So I mean, we literally have to, so if we got notice, we'd have to go send a detective to literally watch the residents to come up with, I mean, you know, chief, could you stop people going in and ask them to come up with, I mean, to me, I know we don't have the resources, but I mean, that's, I imagine what would be the,
I think legally that'd be problematic.
yeah.
Just stop people.
And if I can chime in real quickly, I think a critical step that needs to happen really is that these platforms, when they remit taxes, need to do it by specific location. That's not happening today. And until that happens, you're not going to know. I mean, they may not be active. You don't know how much traffic's coming through. And there's no way to actually audit these platforms without having that specific data. So we know that Cottonwood Heights is receiving what it should be receiving. Right now, and even with the state tax commission, they'll tell you this, we trust that you're giving us the right amount, but there's no way to actually audit them. Without that basic data, I don't think there's anything that you can do unless you get that. That's a step one.
Yeah, it's hard to enforce. It's hard to get any other piece of data if you don't have
Yeah.
even basic ways to get in.
And this is something we discussed in the short-term rental working group. And Julie Davies, a national expert, would say it should not be the platform even remitting the taxes, it should be the owner. Because again, they could have rentals outside of that platform that they are not even using a platform. That it should be the owner responsible for paying the taxes and very transparent for each property.
No, I agree with that sentiment, but
I think it'd be hard to.
it's, if they're all licensed and they're all up to speed and they all have a way to do that and they're all doing it, that's great, but
And if they
initially
aren't, then they're, responsible for their taxes. But I think this is a good suggestion because that was when we met with the tax commission, that would be a big change for them.
sounds like I probably disagree with Representative Moltzman on how easy it is to do enforcement, but
Yeah, I think.
The last thing that I would add is just, I don't think we can completely take the onus off of the platforms only for the sake of if they're not licensed zoned businesses and they're still allowed to be on the marketplace, they're giving them a marketplace.
Yep.
If they're not listed at all, obviously there's a huge incentive for these people to come in compliance, because yes, there are other places that they can be listed, but market share, Airbnb, VRBO, you name it, have the majority. And so it's all about incentivizing and views, frankly.
Yeah.
So if you remove that, then that takes it off the market.
I
Thank
agree, I agree, Matt. I really think it comes down to the cities have land use authority. To me, zoning, that's our responsibility to say, hey, it makes sense to do it here. It doesn't make sense to do it here. For a small city like Cottonwood Heights to go much beyond that, we want to raise our taxes. I guess we could look at that, but maybe some cities can, but I don't think we're in that spot. But anyway, thanks for what you're doing up on the hill. I think we all are in agreement, that changes need to be made, and hopefully you can lend some leadership and get something going up there.
Great. Okay. Thank you for your feedback. I've noted it down and I always welcome more of it from any of you. And this is a great city. As I meet with constituents, I'm just always so impressed by our constituents, their knowledge, their civility, they're just wonderful people.
I would like to add one last comment. It's somewhat extraneous, but I believe it's a resident out of District 3, but I've had long conversations with him. He has a young family. He does not live in a place that's zoned for short-term rentals. And he explained to me that, in our times where he can barely make the mortgage payments and he's not in a position to have a year-round renter or long-term rentals. But he said, boy, that short-term rentals, if I can just do that a little bit during the ski season, that helps me to crack my nut for the year, to be able to continue to own a home with my young family. And so we didn't come here today to solve his problem, but I do have a sympathy or empathy for people in positions where an ADU, internal or external, really doesn't work for them. Long-term ADU doesn't work for them. And I hope that as this evolves over time, we might be able to address, which again, I only bring up Sandy because I did spend some time on their website, and kind of the good news is that, you know, they have these neighborhoods where they identify where these short-term rentals are going on. Not that they can necessarily enforce them, but their challenge indicated on their website last year was getting people to do the licensing. Because I think most people do want to do the right thing and aiming toward the licensing, but I do agree with the comments that have been made that it's a tremendous burden on the cities to try to execute this. So we really appreciate you coming to understand our challenges and then be able to interface with your colleagues at the state level to try to come up with something that'll work for the municipalities as well as the state.
Just add that
Okay.
as I've knocked doors, I met a woman who is retired and in her basement does do short-term rentals, probably illegally. And it allows her to stay in her home and have her own income. And some of her renters are probably longer than short-term, but it allows her to pay her property tax and stay in her home. So I do think that this is an important discussion to have going forward. I would hope most of the ADUs are for long-term renters. That's our great need, is more affordable housing.
Councilmember Holton.
Representative Benyon and Councilmember Burrell, I just want to say, I agree with what you just said wholeheartedly. I do think we need to separate individuals who are living in their home and providing that service on the marketplace and also providing income for themselves to stay in their homes. I could not agree with you more. I do think that when you talk about housing affordability and inventory, those places that are purely just bought and used primarily as a rental should be treated completely differently. And frankly, that's part of the problem. It's not the people who are trying to supplement income. Those are the good actors and people, honestly, that I frankly would support.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate you coming. So next item on our agenda is our staff reports. We have 4 of them. We'll start with item A, which is Cottonwood Heights Butlerville Days wrap up. So we have our great culture manager director here, Ann Etchell, to tell us how everything went. We're excited to hear.
Thanks for having me. The event was really successful. I'll just go over this real quick. Some of the things that happened. The car show, moving the car show to Friday night was a success. We were going to keep it. That everybody loved it. We had about 110 entries. A few people sneak in without signing, so I think it was up a little bit from that. Painting in the Park had about 150 entries. People kept joining in it. Art Council did a wonderful job on that. They're going to continue that on Thursday. Chalk art contest. We had quite a few more entries, but only about 35 people were there. It just was too hot for them. Parade had approximately 64 entries. It's a perfect number. I wouldn't want to go more. It makes it for a good show.
Yeah.
Bingo, we didn't count because we just kept more and more people kept showing up to that one. So it just almost filled out the whole tent. Brian Allen was our caller on that. Loved him. I hope he comes back next year. Everybody else was saying he was funny. Thursday night was the crowd on Thursday night turned out to be like a Friday night crowd. And I think it was just our advertisement. I took your advice last year and advertised it as Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, just so people understood it was 3 and the crowd was huge. Friday night was like Saturday night. The crowd was huge with the main band and then the drone show, the drone show was just a success. I had a lot of people tell me how great it was. Chief did. And then a lot of people saying I loved it. I could bring my dog, and then other people saying I loved it, but I can't wait for the fireworks. So, and then Saturday, the fireworks were a success. The one thing that the Butlerville Day Committee has been talking about is since moving the car show, we need to bring something over to Saturday. So we're thinking about bringing bingo over to Saturday afternoon, like 4 or so, 3, 4, still in negotiation with the committee. And so that will give something else and then maybe adding something else on
Can
Saturday.
you do bingo both days?
That's a possibility. I just need a few more volunteers to do that.
Okay.
But that is a possibility. So anyway, that's kind of a highlight of how some of the stuff went.
So I know part of your leadership allowed us to get a really good deal on the drone show.
Yeah.
Is that a 1-year thing or will that be?
I talked to them, they want to come back. And they said when they left, they're like, we'll get you a good deal. So that was where it kind of stopped at that point.
Okay.
I haven't reached out to him yet to see what he meant by good deal.
Okay.
Revenue and expense, go over this real fast with you. Carnival brought in, everything was as inflation has increased. So we're talking, I think, looking at the numbers, I was probably about anywhere from 10 to 15% more than the previous year, which isn't too bad when you're looking at inflation overall. Some of the companies I was able to negotiate to bring down a little bit, kind of looked at things a little differently. Other ones like the tents, the major things that I have to have were up quite a bit. Carnival, we made, this year we made 28,700. Vendors, which were food and merchandise, we brought in 14,200. Sponsorships was about 16,000. Total revenue was about 58,700. Event expense was about, I'm still working on the numbers on this, trying to get some invoices to come in, 112,600. The previous year was about 95,000. So like I said, we're about 10 to 15% increase, which is normal with this time, what is happening with inflation, but I was able to cut costs on some things. I do want to say thanks to the police department for what they did. Couldn't do this without them. Public Works, absolutely wonderful working with them. Accounting department, they always do everything behind the scenes. Nobody sees what they do. UFA, thank you. Successful again. Fireworks, wonderful. It calms my nerve right before they go off, just to make sure they're going to go off. Accounting, thank you. They handle phone calls up there and wristbands. Wristbands are a nightmare for the front desk. And then just the back end, our public Beatrice. Communications handled a lot of mine, and so did Paula handled the phone calls that come through. Do you have this? What time is this? What time? And some of those. So I just want to make sure everyone is thanked. It's a team effort. And I just wanted to throw that out there. A lot of times we don't see all the people in the back end. So.
Well, perfect. So it sounds like revenues are offsetting just over half the cost.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's great. I think that's what we do cover, I think is beneficial to the community, and I think it
Having a lot of activities, people know they can go and can participate in and be there that don't cost.
Yeah.
I mean, the mini golf, the
inflatable.
pull up slides
Yeah.
and stuff like that, that has always been something that we've always done so that people can come and participate without feeling like they're having to come and, drop 30 or 50 or $100.
Do we try to take any guesstimate on attendance?
Attendance,
Pick your number.
yeah, there's no way of knowing. I just know that every year I can't walk through the park. It's just heavier and heavier trying to get through there. But
The Friday night crowd on the grass was not that as dense as it usually is for the fireworks, but there were.
it was major. It was, I've never seen our Friday night, like Friday was Thursday. Yeah, I mean, it just was me. It was huge. Yeah, it was a great showing. Any comments, any improvements that you see in your eyes that you can give me that I can get back to the committee?
So there are professional crowd estimators. And I would love to know 1 year how many people they come. So it might be worth spending a little bit of money just so we know. I mean, I would love to even advertise it, how many people come to this great event. But anyway.
The other thing we'll have to talk a little bit about, but the time of the parade, if you moved it up,
that was another.
we've had some comments on that.
What are your thoughts?
Earlier in the
Scott?
morning.
Earlier in the morning.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's something we've discussed in the past to move it to to 9 if possible. We had it, when I first started, it was at 4 o'clock. We bumped it to 3. Then we bumped it to 11, in case we ever did go back to the 24th. But I don't think we'll ever go back to the 24th. The reason being that if we ever want to be in, the Days of 47 parade, we tried to offset that. And that's why it was always pushed back, but I don't think we'll ever be on the same day as them. We kind of look at when we're scheduling it. But yeah, the committee would love to try and do a 9 o'clock parade if it's
Okay.
ever possible.
Yeah, I think that would be a positive consideration. Well, thank you for all you do.
If Days of 47 falls on Saturday, then they'll be doing theirs on Saturday, so that would be.
Yeah, but we try and push it to the end, the last Saturday of the month. So to try and avoid Days of 47. Yeah.
Avoiding the 24th.
Yeah, to try and avoid the 24th. So we're not kind of combining those two together.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you, Ann. Appreciate all you do.
yeah.
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Okay, item B under staff reports is a sports court moratorium and pending ordinance discussion. So we all know from our last meeting, the feeling some of our residents regarding pickleball courts. And so we're going to turn the time over to both our city manager, Tim Tingley, and Community and Economic Development Director, Mike Johnson, to give, they prepared some things for us. And so I want to make it clear, and I think I did earlier, that, you know, to move forward on our first legislative item, but we would need 3 people willing to go forward with a moratorium. So, but anyway, go ahead, Tim, or Mike first.
I mean, I asked her, we've done this a couple of times in the past, with the pending ordinance. It just allows the city to take up to 6 months to decide what they want to do and give them time without having to deal with more applications and other types of zoning issues. And that's why I thought with this one, with it being imminent now, that might be a good idea to just give ourselves some time. But
And Mike's probably, he's gonna cover this, but keep in mind, and just so everyone knows, that any applications that are in for permits right now that we're reviewing, they would not be in this moratorium. They are already an application that's received, and we would have to process that. It's anything new after council adopts a moratorium, if that's what you decide to do. So.
I'm going to try to go as fast as I can. There's a lot of information in here, so I might just skip over some of it, but stop me if you have questions. The background for this, if you're all aware, is we had a number of complaints recently over one particular sport court project. A resident was building a pickleball court, started building it without permits, was stop work, has since received a permit with a lot of modifications from what was originally being constructed. We've had a few, I wouldn't call it a widespread issue recently, but certainly an uptick in calls about pickleball courts being built recently. The most common concerns, and really the only concerns we hear about on these, are lighting and noise. So tonight is just a discussion of whether the current ordinances are sufficient and the timing of updated ordinances, and again, a potential moratorium. When we talk about sport courts, you know, this is typically what we're thinking of. I think a lot of the focus is on pickleball, but there are different types of sport courts. You have tennis, basketball, pickleball are probably the most common, and you see a lot of combination courts around. But, you know, even within a residential setting, you can see the one on the top left has huge light structures and is pretty substantial, and the one on the bottom right is kind of just a slab on the ground. So there's some flexibility in how these can look and be implemented. So let's talk about what's currently regulated by city code that would apply to these. Sport courts themselves are not regulated directly. There's no direct regulations as it applies to a sport court surface or anything like that. But we do have other ordinances that affect sport court construction. The first one is outdoor lighting. On the left side is the city standards. On the right side is some common specifications for sport courts that we looked up at, for this one on usapickleball.org, which is kind of the official pickleball website. You can see on the left, our lighting standards are fairly strict, 12 feet in height, which is way less than the 20 to 26 feet recommended by the pickleball organization. We have limits on how bright a bulb can be. It's like 500 lumens before it has to be full cutoff. And then overall site illumination, which is maybe even more important, which is measured in lumens per acre. And basically you get 1 lumen per square foot of your property. So if you have an acre property, you get 43,000 total lumens, and that includes all lighting generated from your house, from your sport court, from any other lighting source on your property. With the caveat that if you go east of Wasatch into the foothills, that total gets cut in half. So in the eastern foothills of the city, the total for an acre property would only be half an acre's worth of lighting. So what you can see here, and then Kelvin, the bulb color or temperature, that's measured in something called Kelvin. And that's basically the higher the number, the more fluorescent or kind of blue the light is.
Our restriction is to warmer temperature.
Right, yeah, 3,000 is kind of a middle ground on the warmer side of lighting. What's recommended for sport courts is very fluorescent, 5,000 plus Kelvin. So you can see in red the things that already would not be allowed. And in the case of the court that generated some of the comments from the last meeting, that permit got issued without lighting. That property owner said, the lights I want don't meet code. There was no, variance process or anything that was applicable there. So he removed the lighting from his proposal. So there is no lighting associated. with
So
that.
was this ordinance that's currently on the books just grandfather from the county, or did we pass?
No,
it?
this was in 2019 or 2020. The city adopted
The outdoor
an outdoor
lighting.
lighting ordinance. Yeah.
Or did the dark skies and.
Yeah, it's a residential lighting standard that, would apply to a sport court light as well. And you can see, oh, go ahead.
Well, I guess the question I would have is, and I realize that the higher the pole, the more the light is broadcast out over a larger area.
Yep.
But in keeping with the dark skies and striving to not have so much light pollution within our communities, it's if there's a way to get the light to only shine down on the court, I think that neighbors would probably be a lot, more affable to this whole thing if the light wasn't
It's over 500
bleeding
watts,
out.
it has to be covered.
Yeah, if it's over 500 lumens, it has to be full cutoff, which is just that. It's
500 lumens, not
it's
watts.
shielded from the light being dispersed in a horizontal plane, shielded downwards and specifically
But if that were
directed.
the case, I don't mean to be argumentative, but then why would the residents surrounding this new court be so up in arms that the lighting is a problem for them?
Full cutoff means light cannot be sensed on the property line. There's no light trespass. That doesn't mean you can't see the light from across the street or from backyard to backyard. And what it also means is that pickleball play or sports play can last well into the night after dark. There's no natural break of, it's too dark to play now and you can have pickleball going late into the night.
Well, I mean, I get what the purpose is. I'm not having been over at their houses and experienced what they're going through. I can tell you, I have neighbors that are eye level across the street and their lights shine right into my house. Like I can't enjoy my view. So in my own experience, I know how unpleasant it is to have lights that shine into your space. And I don't really understand how this ordinance controls that. Can you help me to understand?
Well, on the left is what we have. I think the concern is that we've stopped projects in the middle of construction without permits that are not following our ordinance. I think if a project followed our ordinance, there probably wouldn't be a huge issue. A 12-foot down oriented light pole with the light regulated is not, by design is not going to be a major nuisance, but a
So
26-foot light pole.
Okay, well, I'm still confused. Is the court that has the several residents up in arms, did it follow these?
No, its proposal did
It's
not. So
not,
it was
no.
issued.
And they were issued a permit without lighting.
Yeah, they
They
removed the
chose to
lighting.
put, so
from
now
their
they've
proposal.
removed
The
their
lighting
lighting.
never even went on.
They wanted to install 18 to 20-foot poles that were way brighter than what the city code allowed.
Well, I thought that the residents were complaining about the light as well as the
The
noise.
court didn't even get built.
The court was partially built, the lights were not installed.
They were worried about the
It
lighting.
was all
It was all before. it was all
projection
done.
of what they would be concerned about.
Okay.
So I think the point this is trying to make is the current ordinance regulates light pretty well. It also doesn't match well what a standard pickleball court lighting would need. A 12-foot light pole, if you hit a ball too high, it's going to disappear into the dark and mess with visibility, which is why they want the taller poles. So this is fairly well regulated in the current ordinance today, and it worked in the recent case. in the sense that the applicant removed the lighting. The other ordinance we have is fencing. Fencing on property lines is allowed at 6 feet. You can just go build a 6-foot fence in your side or rear yard without permits. Right now, we don't regulate the material of the fencing or anything. You can increase that up to 8 feet with a conditional use permit and building permit. You can increase it, I said 10, but I meant 12. You can increase it up to 12 feet with a conditional use permit and signed neighbor consent. That ordinance has been on the books since 2017, 16, Scott, I remember when we went through that. If you set your fencing back off property lines, the fencing height can go up 14 to 20 feet with a corresponding 3-foot to 9-foot setback with building permit. We don't see a ton of complaints generated from sport court fencing, but it's related. Pickleball tennis courts recommend a typical, minimum 10-foot backstop. So on the ends of the courts, 10 feet to stop, balls from going into adjacent properties. 3 feet on the sides. You saw the picture. Some of them don't have any.
So does that mean they need to go to the conditional use and neighbor consent to get a 10-foot backdrop?
If it were on the property line, or you could set your fence in off your property line.
Okay,
In the case of a 10-foot fence, 3 feet,
oh, okay.
and build it 3 feet offset from your property and just get a
So,
building permit.
as someone who grew up with a sport court in my backyard, we did netting. Do we have any restrictions against netting? That's how we didn't lose balls over the fence.
It's a good question, and it's kind of a gray area in the ordinance. So I don't know the exact answer on how that would be regulated, but if it's a permanent structure that's acting as a barrier between properties, I would think that we would interpret that as a fence.
Okay.
So it's allowed. We see this happen. There's a process if you want it on property lines, or you can set it back. We don't see a lot of issues with the fencing standards, but that 8 to 12 feet is what people are generally seeking for sport courts. And then in certain areas of the city, we do actually have a provision in sensitive lands that can come into play. In areas where there's steep slopes or a lot of groundwater, we have limitations on how much impervious surface, hard pavement there can be on a property that doesn't allow water to discharge into the ground or causes water to discharge onto steep hills. So we have a limit of 30% of a total site area of impervious surface. That does not apply everywhere. But in high groundwater areas and steep slope areas, we see that most commonly apply.
This is actually Councilmember Bro, what stopped them from finishing their court.
So
They didn't
Sleds.
comply to this.
and that includes any hardscape on a property, including the roof of your house, your driveway, walkways, sport courts. We don't say how you need to provide or how to comply with that 30%, only that you do. So again, in this case, what the applicant did to meet that 30% is say and agree to replace his driveway and walkways on his property with pervious pavers. And got down to 30%, and that's allowed. So this can not directly, but indirectly impact the size and location of sport courts on certain properties in the city. You can see the typical court sizes on the right there. The other thing to touch on is noise, which is the other concern. The county health code is on the left there. During the daytime hours, it's either 10 decibels above ambient sound, not to exceed 60 decibels. And then at night, that drops down to a 50 decibel limit. That is measured at the receiving property line. Just based on some studies that I found online, just through research, pickleball noise can reach 70 decibels measured 100 feet away. It can be less, the science is not exact on this. It depends on what study you're reading, but the point is a pickleball can be loud and it's not continuous noise and constant noise, but a hit of a pickleball can exceed that 60 decibels. And more so than even the instance of hitting the ball, creating noise, the pitch of it is kind of high, which I read numerous articles that's almost more of an annoyance than the actual noise itself. For comparison,
What do you
tennis,
mean by the pitch of it?
it's like a plastic paddle with a plastic ball.
Oh,
So
okay,
it's
yeah, okay,
it's high
I'm
pitch,
with you,
yeah.
okay, yeah, I thought I was
Yeah.
thinking pitch. of-
No.
It's closer to your tonight.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Yeah, busy city noise is in the 55 decibel limit. Tennis is 40, so you can see pickleball is typically a little more noisy. So we have all those ordinances. I will say just from a staff standpoint, the concern of lighting and fencing and things like that are already mitigated fairly well through the ordinance. Now, the way that's, if courts are built without permits, there can be some concern expressed in neighborhoods. If there are HOA regulations that prohibit certain things, there can be concern expressed by neighborhoods, but with this one example at the end of the process, that court is still allowed to go in. However, the concern of overlighting and play late into the night is somewhat mitigated by the outdoor lighting ordinance. Lighting and fencing is currently well regulated, but additional restrictions could be considered. And I did not finish that bullet point. Prohibit sport court lighting altogether. Oh, you could do that. So that's one option. If we didn't feel like the lighting standards were satisfactory, we could prohibit sport court lighting specifically. Noise, we find is best regulated through proximity requirements as opposed to limiting hours of play or requiring, sound dampening equipment or things like that. That becomes really hard to enforce on a consistent basis. Establishing a minimum setback from adjacent properties is a little easier. There are other ways to dampen sound as well. Fencing materials could be looked at, vegetation, landscape, tree planting, things like that. So if staff were to recommend a revised ordinance, what we would recommend is a reasonable approach, which would establish, maybe a minimum distance from court to adjacent structures. So where people are in their house, establishing a distance of 100, 150, 200 feet away to let that noise dissipate a little bit, with potential options if you want to reduce that setback of doing certain noise mitigation studies and recommending reasonable mitigation measures like fencing or vegetation or something like that. That being said, the council has the decision tonight on whether to vote on a moratorium, which would give us 6 months without issuing sport court permits to get new standards in place.
How many sports court applications do you have at this time?
2, 3, maybe. It's not a lot. It's more than it was 5 years ago, because 5 years ago it was basically zero, especially pickleball. So there is an uptick. It's not a common or pervasive issue, right?
So Mike, could I ask you about one of the things that concerns me about pickleball courts are rentals, renting hours, and where they're bringing in people and parking for those type of things. Is there a way to put something in there? To look at that? Yeah,
you could prohibit, residential pickleball courts from being rented or used for commercial purposes. I don't know how you enforce that. That might be a challenge, but you could put that language in there just to have it there to make the statement.
Kind of professional that wanted to teach in their backyard. That's, as opposed to somebody who wants to invite.
That's different from
24 or 48 neighbors.
And then how would that be different than, running a childcare center?
Teaching, it would
or
require a
something?
home business license and conditional use permit, just like a daycare would.
Right.
parking considerations. Right?
If it were used for a home business, it would. But we can say it's for private residential use only. Courts cannot be rented. You can build that language into an ordinance. So I think this comes up enough that, and we're already in the process of doing regular ordinance updates. There's kind of two options as we see it. You could impose the moratorium. We could work quickly to just get sport court standards resolved as quickly as possible, get a new ordinance adopted. We could also just bring forward our already planned ordinance amendment that deals with sport courts and other yard elements that just kind of part of our ordinance cleanup that we think would come forward in the next, 3 to 6 months anyways. And we can do that with or without a moratorium. So we just, I guess the takeaway is we're doing something. It's just up to you on what it looks
Go
like.
ahead.
Let me just throw this out for your thought. We currently have a prohibition on noise ordinances, in the evening, irrespective if it's pickleball or whatever. So that exists. And so we can enforce that now. We do enforce it now. We'll enforce it if you make the changes to the ordinance and to the pickleball.
Yeah.
The noise ordinance says what it is, and it's still in effect. And I know that that's a big issue for a lot of people that, they're concerned about the noise, but we already have a remedy in place for that. So,
So let me give you my thoughts and we'll get each of yours real quickly. So mine are, has changed a little bit. I don't know if telling somebody they can't build is the right way to go. We can pass an ordinance next session, I mean, next meeting. I mean, it might take a month, but we don't have to make it a 6 month long or 6 month long process. I just don't know if I feel comfortable telling somebody they can't build a pickleball court for 6 months, where I'd rather just
Well, it's a pending ordinance. If we came up with an ordinance in 4 weeks, then it's done and it's over with. If it takes a little bit more time, the 6 month is, I believe, by statute, and that's just you cannot go beyond that simply because that is where the legislature has decided that's where you're becoming intrusive into personal property rights. But they also understand that it takes time to go through the process. I mean, there's a lot of good things that I think that you found and have suggested.
Councilmember Burrow, what do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of ironic. We were just talking about STRs. I mean, just in my lifetime, I've watched society go from, you go and work for the man, so to speak. You're employed somewhere. Now we have so many people who work on contracts. We have monetized websites. We have, people looking for ways to crack their financial nut every month, and they're very innovative. And so these challenges of people seeing an opportunity possibly to, I could recoup my investment in building this sport court if I go on Swimply. I can get the Swimply Act and I can have people coming and renting from me. And I think as Representative Benyon pointed out, it's a real burden on the police. Just like, one of my things in my neighborhood is the noise of Wasatch Boulevard. And of course, we all passed the resolution that we'd like to see Wasatch Boulevard at 35 miles an hour. And the mayor has often said into the microphone, wow, if the cars were driving 35 miles an hour, we wouldn't have all these noise problems. And I mean, we work toward making life livable and meeting these noise ordinances. But I am not real crystal clear. I mean, I think that Councilman Bracken's point that a moratorium gives us 6 months, but maybe the staff is able to redo the ordinance in the next 4 weeks. So at this point, I'm not completely opposed to a moratorium. I also think that this is situation in our age of technology where we do have people, again, looking to how they can have the lifestyle they want and, recoup these costs and those, and so, I'm open to both sides. That's mine.
Councilmember Newell.
I look at the small number of residents that this is impacting, and I can't see how a moratorium will do that. I really like what I'm seeing here, as far as changing some of the code and everything else to be able to force people into specific compliance, which again moves me away from a moratorium. I just have a tough time telling people, hey, you can't do this in your backyard. The parameters that are here, I think, are effective. Once we see them all put together and put down in code, I think it'll be really amenable for me to be able to accept that.
Yeah, I agree. I know the Pickleball Association is working on a ball that minimizes noise, that would make a lot of heartache go away. But anyway, sorry. And Councilmember Holton.
Yeah, thank you. Great discussion. I would not be in favor of a moratorium. I am grateful that the county has some ordinances in place when it comes to lighting, and I guess the city as well. And when it comes to noise ordinances, it's hard because it's not just pickleball. I know pickleball has been selected because it's become super popular, but there are backyard pools, there are young kids that are streaming. There's a lot of backyard activity that people do in their own private property that does cause noise. And how do you group all of those things into one by then just picking out one specific sport? I do know I've been to individuals' homes in Cottonwood Heights that have kind of a multi-use court. It's their kids' Tonka truck playground. It's the basketball. It's the pickleball. It's everything under the sun. And to say that, we're not going to allow them to take part in those activities I would not be in favor of that. I would be in favor of the city looking at some improvements. I think we can work on those without telling everyone to halt all activity citywide. I'd be in favor of looking at any proposals and moving forward that way, just not with a moratorium.
So I don't think we'll move forward with the moratorium, but I do think there's an urgency, Mike, at looking at an ordinance that we can get passed that makes sense. That minimizes as much, anyway, if your
Yeah.
staff will work on that, I'd appreciate that. And
And we are headed into fall and winter, which, that outdoor construction activity will go down a little bit.
I
So.
appreciate Councilor Bracken for putting this on the agenda because it's, he's responding to constituents. Thanks for.
I mean,
doing that.
yeah, that's the case. And yeah, my only comment would be that, the legislature kind of told us what is too far for telling someone that you can't. And
Yeah,
they established that. So,
yeah,
um,
perfect. Okay,
And so can I just ask one point of clarification?
yes.
So the staff will consider the Swimply and other apps because I
Yeah.
just like with Airbnb and all that, I don't know how we could as a municipality really impose restrictions on people having apps. So maybe we revisit the whole subject or how.
Yeah, we can take a shot at language. It'll have to be about use of the court, not being for commercial purposes, unless there's a proper licensing procedure.
But then how would do residents have to complain? Do they have to take pic? I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I get from the residents. They say, well, wait a minute, now you're putting it on me to play detective and all of that. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, there's two code enforcement officers and we're not out in people's backyards. So we do rely on calls to come in. And once they come in, we see it through, and having that ordinance in place will help clearly enforce that and make it so there's no question there. But there is a process.
Councilmember Burrell, thanks for bringing that up. My suggestion would be is that we break those out into two separate things. I think commercial activity in people's private property should be a different discussion compared to pickleball mitigation. I wouldn't like a simple yes or no vote on pickleball mitigation with commercial activity as one decision. Just my 2 cents. I know that there are multiple platforms out there that also you can rent your driveway to put someone's trailer. You can rent garage space or any other. I mean, you could just go spend all day and find all sorts of apps that are using your personal property to make some money and monetize it. I think that discussion should be talked about holistically as should commercial activity happen in that way? And if so, what's the onus on residents to report that or get a permit for it or a business license? I think that's a bigger discussion. And my recommendation would be to break those two apart.
yeah, the only way this is going to get done in a timely manner is if we keep it. Pretty straightforward.
Narrow. Okay.
I mean, these suggestions are great. I think we can get them done.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, even though he said 4 weeks.
This has to go to planning commission, so it'll take a little bit.
Yeah, so it's gonna take that long.
We'll get working on it. So thank you all for that discussion. I really appreciate it. We've got 2 more items to get through. So item C is what we're gonna have Matt Ship give us some background on TAP funding related to federal road projects. So just so you know, we've got you scheduled again for our next meeting. We had 30 minutes. We're going to give you 10 now. So don't feel like you've got to rush it. You'll have plenty of time for the next meeting, I promise. So
He only gets 5 minutes if his keychain is not changed. 5 now.
I wore it with pride for a year. Now I'll wear it with shame for another year. So we'll go that direction. Mayor and council, thank you. We just received a notification from Wasatch Front Regional Council that letters of intent are due at the end of this month on various projects or proposed projects from different municipalities in the district of Wasatch Front. These projects can be anywhere from, this is the TIP or the Transportation Improvement Program, and the TIP includes STP or Service Transportation, CMAC, Congestion Mitigation, the TAP, Transportation Alternative, as well as carbon reduction programs. So there's 4 categories of projects that are included with Wasatch Front and these letters of intent. what we're doing today is we got the letter just last week, or probably a little bit before that, not too much before that, stating that they're moving forward for these letters of intent. We bringing this to you as a council to introduce a few projects just for your consideration. This is not the list, and we're not trying to say this is the list. What we're trying to do is give you some talking points or starting points that you can look at and come up with some ideas. One of those, I'll start on the left and work my way across, was the Fort Union Boulevard Cycle Track. This is a program last year that the council asked us to apply for. We did. We scored fairly well, but we didn't score super in the, we weren't good enough to get into the list. Let's put it that way. We ended up with 2 projects last cycle. So we're bringing this one back again for your consideration. This is on Fort Union, south side of Fort Union. It is the part of the
Mid-Valley Active
thank you, Mike.
Transportation Plan.
Yeah, I can never remember that. It's part of the Mid-Valley Active Transportation Plan, of which you're a part. Going along, we have the Highland Drive pedestrian trail.
May I ask a question? Why is it called, so it's a protected cycle track? Is that synonymous with protected bike lane?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, correct.
And how long, what length is that? Is that
We're
8
starting
mile? Is it a couple hundred yards?
13th east. to
13th east
Yeah,
to,
I
I don't
that.
know the mileage.
I'll measure it for you while we talk.
Mike.
Okay,
Okay, and then the other one we have, this has been brought up a couple of times. And so we decided to propose this. This is a trail pedestrian path along 2300 north of Fort Union. This would connect us up to our neighbors to the north and give us a sidewalk on the west side where one does not presently exist. No, I'm on the wrong side. That should be on 23. Did we do 23?
Yeah, you got that one on Highland.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Okay, I'm on Highland, I'm sorry. This one is the Highland. This is a connection from the East Jordan Trail that's in. We've received funding for studying the rest of East Jordan. We've put in an application for the engineering on this portion of Highland. We're moving forward. We're asking for funding. So if we get the funding for the engineering, we're ready to move forward with the construction of that if that does become available. So this is that project, the Highland Pedestrian Trail. We did also propose last year, and the council at the time chosen, I believe, not to go forward with it, but it's once again, we're putting it on here as a talking point as part of Bengal Boulevard and 35th doing a roundabout. So program there. And there has been applications in the past for the Danish Road.
may I ask, which was it applied for in the past for that roundabout? Which of these grants?
I brought it
came
forward,
forward
the council
last year.
didn't, the council.
Yeah, but I
didn't move
thought,
forward.
hadn't Councilman Bracken brought it before to one of these and it didn't?
35 east.
Yeah, the
No.
the
No.
roundabout, it's never been formally advanced. Okay.
Okay, then the Danish Road, sidewalk projects, this has been brought up quite a few times. We have made application in the past for Danish Road. We haven't been successful, but we'll bring it forward again for your consideration. This is adding the sidewalk where it's missing on the west side of Danish Road, making that continuation through there.
Real quick, is there any option to request reclassification that it's more of a regional road than not?
There is that possibility, but the chances of it happening based on volume, it's
Not
not
gonna happen.
gonna. We've
Can I
had that
ask also
discussion.
a point of clarification on this project? We know that there's a house under construction and I understand that they will have to finish the sidewalk in front of the house that's under construction. Is it located here?
I don't recall. I don't know for sure.
There's been a
Well,
permit
Mike-
in there pending for a long time.
Yeah,
No,
there's
they're
one that's
building.
been,
They
yeah,
have
are
to-
they?
the
They're
house
building.
is all
They're-
framed in and-
yes, they'll be required. I don't know
Typically, that
where
would
it
be a
is.
requirement, yeah. I don't know off the top of my head, but
Well, I only asked that because, the continuous sidewalk on the west side of the street, right, is what we're
Correct.
after.
Correct.
And also mitigating the blind curve, some kind of traffic calming, lit signal. I mean, this area is very dangerous, for cyclists. So it's not just the sidewalk issue. I just want to point that out.
Okay, and then we also have received requests to look at between Touring Court up to Deer Creek, if you will. Deer Creek is right in here on Creek Road. This is the intersection of Danish and Creek. This is 35th and Creek, and looking at some safety issues through this corridor. On this one, we need to address the intersections if we're going to do things on here. Because this program does not address crosswalks and things of that nature. They won't build a crosswalk or mid crosswalks with these unless we're talking going in for instance, hawk signals and things of that nature. So if we want to address it that way or look at lighting and whatnot, we can. But this is a corridor that we were requested to bring forward as something to review and study.
So I just want to get clarification. So you're saying that on the TAP, which is Transportation Alternatives Program, even TAP cannot be focused on mid-block
Yeah,
crossings?
those are very small projects. They're not a project. It has to be part of a whole. If you're building a trail from one side to another, putting that in, you're building a whole. You're not putting in, if you will, just a crosswalk.
It kind of has to be more of a larger
Larger
scope project to qualify for the, well, not
plus
qualify, but to
you're-
address the regional aspects.
And you're also dealing with federal funds and let's just say a $10,000 crosswalk would end up, costing upwards of $60,000 to do. This funding is too small. So they don't do those.
So it has to be a larger
Correct.
area.
So when you say a larger area, then it would be a road redesign to the whole strip that we're.
It could be, yes, but if you're going to do that, when you're talking about these funds, you can either do a transportation alternative, a trail along that stretch, if that's what we want to look at, between those areas. And as part of that, we can look at different crosswalks in that overall system. As far as the road is concerned, these funds deal with, outside of TAP, these funds deal with volumes or reduction of like air quality issues. So it's the different type of program. This is not a safety funds. This is, although safety comes into the consideration, for instance, building the trail along, let's just say Creek Road from Touring Circle, because we don't have a sidewalk through there, down to 35th, that can be considered as a TAP program.
Matt, you're at 11 minutes.
Oh, I got my gator tag though.
Well, if this is our opportunity to deliberate on such.
We're
an
gonna
important-
do it again in the next meeting.
I know, but we only have until the end of the month to make a decision.
Yeah, so
So-
we have a noticed meeting in 5 minutes and one other discussion item. So
Well, I just want to go on the record that this is one of the most important things to my constituents, and I'm very disappointed that I was prepared. I wanted to hear from the counselors and for us to cut this important subject to such a short.
that's why we put it at both meetings. So we'll spend some more time and not limit it in our next meeting. So let's move on to Mike to the sensitive lands update, and I'll let you direct that here.
Yeah, I'm gonna be very quick. We got some comments at the last meeting, not a ton. A few of them expressed concerns that have been long addressed. The trail issue along Little Cottonwood Creek was part of an old master plan that was changed and adopted, and there's no intention for the city to build a public trail along Little Cottonwood Creek. I think the council's all aware of that, but I wanted to just reiterate. And then we got some written comments, I think they were in your packet, from a resident that went through the riparian section of the ordinance and proposed some, what I would consider minor changes. I've gone through and reviewed those. I don't think that staff agreed with all of them, and some of them were editorial changes that didn't really change the meaning of the ordinance, but a lot of them are reasonable. I've incorporated them into a revised draft that we'll just send out instead of going through, because it's very minor in my opinion. And then I just would like direction from the council. We're ready with an ordinance at this point. If you're comfortable scheduling it for action, I'll get the latest and greatest revised ordinance out to the council for the entire SLED's proposal. I'll publish that on the city website and send it to the email list. But it's ready. I mean, the deliberation at this point is really minor changes that I don't think are substantially changing the intention or language in the code. I think we've come a long way. And all the public input's been very appreciated in shaping this to a reasonable state. So
Do you have a date we can get it up on the website by?
it can be up probably by Thursday or Friday this week.
Okay, so then we'll have a full week to review, plus a couple of days for our next meeting. Okay, any questions?
Do you want to move for action next meeting or have another comment
Comment.
period and then have it open for the first meeting in October?
I think we're ready to move. I am, unless anybody feels differently.
You want another public comment period or?
I think, any council meeting can have that general citizen comment. I can, in the email I send out, be clear, this is scheduled for action on September 19th. If you have comments, please share them in the general comment portion of that meeting. And do it that way.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that I understand if I get asked.
We'll proceed that way then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next is our review of calendars and upcoming events, September 26th. This is new on our calendar at 5 p.m. will be the ribbon cutting for the Ferguson Park at 7725 South Prospector Drive. So that will be the parking lot completely finished. This will be the parking for the trailhead. So this has been a long time in coming. And so we hope everybody will put that on your calendars and join us for that important event. October 20th.
It's a far cry from the 3 office buildings that were proposed there to the community council way back in the day.
Yeah. October 27th from 5 to 7 is the Monster Mash here at or actually at the Cottonwood Heights Recreation Center. And then October 31st from 3 to 4:30, the trunk or treat at the Cottonwood Heights City Hall parking lot, which is always a lot of fun. But we do not have a closed meeting. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the work session and enter into the CDRA meeting scheduled to begin in 3 minutes after our adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Earl, second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.